And if you're not sure, like, how does state corruption sort of work, this is a good example. So I'll give you sort of, an example from this. And this is how it happens in South Africa too. So generally with corruption, you will have a contract, a government contract. So something needs to be done. It could be a bridge, it could be anything, the construction of something or the providing of some service. So you will file a cost for that, let's say 100 million of whatever currency, and it appears that that's a fully costed, project. Meanwhile, actually, the real cost of the project is like 75 million. And the 25 remaining then is just put into and billed as services, consultation, consultancy. So there's 1,000 different ways that they usually structure it or price it or whatever. But that's how it's done. And then that 25 million, which isn't actually necessary, it's just made up stuff, that then is then siphoned off either directly into a company which provides those services or products, which is owned by the person or usually a family member or friend, or it goes into a Swiss bank account or something like that. And that's what they did here. They had a certain percentage on these big projects, whether it was an oil refinery, whether it was a pipe, or it doesn't matter. There was loads of projects where they just found ways to siphon off the money. And that's how it worked, and that's how it worked here. So anyway, but they found that it was almost the entire Workers' Party. And because Petrobras, the state-owned company, was so big, there was just millions and millions of millions of dollars being handed around and being siphoned off. And it consumed basically the whole party, as you said, Dilma Rousseff and Lula in the end. But the thing with Lula is that it was found that he hadn't actually benefited himself. And they overturned the result because the way he had, what was it? Something to do with implication. So he had been implicated, but in fact, actually, he had not benefited. And the way that the prosecution had crafted their case was political. It was intended to try and bring him down, and the Constitution overturned it. Yeah, I don't know if you know more about that, Chris.
I was go into that. So when you say the prosecution, it wasn't just the lawyers. This was actually the judge as well. So the judge himself was a man called Sergio Marori. The Intercept did an expose where they showed that his decisions were partial and political, that he was passing down advice, investigation leads for the reasoning to prevent the Workers' Party from winning the 2018 election. And this guy was actually nominated, given the position by Bolsonaro, nominated to be Minister of Justice for Public Security when Bolsonaro won. So the judge himself was an opponent and part of the opposing political party. So it seems like a crime was committed, but then the investigators themselves were also committing their own crime, effectively.
Yeah. So it's interesting, but so the thing that the Guardian article also mentioned, though, is that in order to get the extra support from different sections of the population, as well as also just within political systems, so you have the Congress and the Senate, whatever, in order to get people to sign up to a deal or to vote in favor of something in Congress or whatever, this is where, Lula, as well as the party, had to then make those deals and what's the word, sort of got themselves involved in this corruption. Obviously, there was enrichment too, personal enrichment, but a large part of it, or a big part of it at least, was this thing about, okay, well, in order for you, so someone would say, in order for me to get, to vote for you on this bill or whatever, they would give this person a seat or a job, or their company would get a contract, something like this. So that's a part of the corruption, which I think people perhaps need to consider, is that if you don't, or if they didn't make those deals, then they wouldn't have passed certain bills, which means their government would have failed. So it comes down to
trying to be a progressive and a deeply corrupt system. It's sort of...
Yes, exactly. So I mean, obviously, I don't want to defend corruption, and obviously, the ideal system is to get rid of it and stamp it out, because later on it eventually becomes a huge problem. It eventually undermines your work anyway. Even if you get people to vote the bills mean nothing because the implementation is not there. It's all, people are just there for money. So later it can rot the system. But you can kind of see a little bit as to the rationale is that, well, okay, if we don't give these people who are our opponents or who are only here because of expediency anyway, if we don't give them something, we won't pass this legislation. We'll lose. And then when the election comes, people will say, well, what have you guys done? And we'll say, we've done nothing, because we can't pass it, because we haven't given these corrupt people what they want. So it's a very interesting example of that sort of fact in politics, at least some kind
in sort of a bourgeois political system,
right?
You have to sit down with these sort of opponents and make a deal. And if you're making a deal with thieves, the chances are what they want is stolen in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously the article does say that some of that, some of those things that they wanted to pass were built on sort of ethical quicksand. So the people that they bought off, who then did vote sort of momentarily, later, gave up or turned because they needed more money or they wanted more pay. So I don't think I don't want to sit here and say like, oh yeah, well, this corruption is fine because that's how you get stuff done. Well, it shows that the complex nature of why this seemingly good party that wanted to do good things got themselves into such a mess. Part of it, obviously, is because of just personal enrichment and greed. Part of it is an attempt to try and make progress.
This is something that we've had to highlight for issues that we've seen, similar issues that we've had to see in other progressive parties that have gone through the parliamentary or the democratic route to socialism, as they coin it, like Venezuela, like Bolivia, and the difficulties and roadblocks that we've seen thrown up with them. And again, we're not saying the words, but so it's say, well, you wouldn't be having these problems if you listened to us.
Yeah, right. Exactly, yeah.
It just highlights that these are the obstacles that these parties go through, because the opponents will throw these things up. So it's difficult to get.
No, it shows you. Yeah, when you even if you win in a bourgeois parliamentary system, these are some of the challenges and things. It's not just as simple as win the election. Okay, well, you have to, unless you win everything. But also, that's the other part, is that with the campaigning, the other side is, which we mentioned before, is that the power of money. So even if you have great ideals and ideas, you need money to win, to campaign, and also it's not just buying books and films and speeches and whatever. It's also just like, there's a local candidate who he knows all of the local stuff like the back of his hand. He's their guy. They love him. He wants a kickback. That's what he'll do. You'll get his voters with that. So it's there's money on that side too. You need to have the money, in order to win in that sense too. But as you already said, this is the messiness of bourgeois politics, of market democracy, in the real sense, market democracy.